The starship Astral Observer moved silently through the darkness of space. Its silver hull reflected the distant light of the yellow star that humans called the sun. Inside the ship, Commander Vexthul stood before a large viewing screen. His purple skin glowed softly in the dim light of the bridge. His forearms moved across the control panels with practiced ease. "Commander, we are holding position at the edge of their solar system," reported his navigation officer. The bridge crew of 12 aliens all looked similar to their commander. They had tall, thin bodies and large black eyes that could see in many different types of light. Commander Vexthul nodded slowly. For 3 months, his ship had been watching the third planet from this star. The planet was blue and green, covered with water and land. Most importantly, it was home to a young species that called themselves humans. Dr. Karaneth walked onto the bridge carrying a data pad in her lower set of arms. She was the ship's expert on studying new species. Her job was to understand how different life forms behaved and lived together. "Commander, I have the latest reports from our observation probes," she said. Her voice made soft clicking sounds, which was normal for her people. The humans continued to show very strange behavior patterns. Vexthul turned to face her. "What kind of strange behavior?" "They gather in large groups for reasons we cannot understand. They perform actions that seem to have no logical purpose. They make loud sounds together and move their bodies in coordinated ways." The commander found this interesting. His people, the Zephyrians, had studied many planets with intelligent life. Most species followed predictable patterns. They built shelters, found food, raised their young, and protected their territory. But humans were different. "Show me the latest recordings," Vexthul ordered. Dr. Karaneth activated her data pad. The main screen showed images of a human settlement. The probe cameras had captured everything from high above the planet's surface. Buildings stood in neat rows. Vehicles moved along paved roads. Everything looked normal for a developing civilization. But then the images changed. Hundreds of humans were moving toward a large structure at the center of their settlement. They carried objects in their hands. Many wore matching colored coverings on their bodies. Some had painted their faces with bright colors. "This recording is from yesterday," Dr. Karaneth explained. "The settlement is called Pine Ridge. We have been watching it for several weeks because the humans there display the most unusual behaviors." Vexthul studied the images carefully. The humans looked excited. They moved quickly and talked to each other constantly. Many of the smaller humans jumped up and down as they walked. "Are they preparing for battle?" asked the navigation officer. "That was my first thought," replied Dr. Karaneth. "But their body language does not suggest fear or aggression. They appear to be experiencing positive emotions." This confused Vexthul even more. In his experience, when species gathered in large groups, it was usually for war, hunting, or religious ceremonies that involved sacrifice. The humans seemed happy, but they were clearly preparing for something important. "Focus our sensors on the large structure," Vexthul commanded. "I want to know what happens when they all gather there." The ship's advanced sensors turned toward the human settlement. The technology was far beyond anything humans had developed. The Zephyrians could see and hear everything that happened on the planet's surface. They could even detect the emotional states of individuals by reading their body heat and chemical signals. As the hours passed, more humans arrived at the settlement. They came in their primitive vehicles from other areas. Some traveled for many hours to reach Pine Ridge. The gathering grew larger and larger. Jake Morrison stood outside the big building and watched the crowds arrive. He had lived in Pine Ridge his entire life. As head of the local organizing committee, it was his job to make sure everything went smoothly for the big event. "Jake, are you ready for tonight?" called Lisa Carter as she walked up to him. Lisa was the town's mayor and had been planning this event for months. "As ready as we can be," Jake replied with a smile. "The weather is perfect and it looks like we'll have our biggest crowd ever." Lisa looked around at all the people gathering. Children ran between the adults, laughing and playing. Teenagers walked in groups, wearing their school colors proudly. Older residents set up chairs and unpacked food from baskets and coolers. "The whole county will be here," Lisa said. "Even people from the next state are coming. This is going to be special." Jake nodded. He had seen many of these events over the years, but this one felt different. There was extra excitement in the air. Everyone seemed to understand that something important was about to happen. High above them, the Zephyrian observers watched every movement. Dr. Karaneth took detailed notes on her datapad. She recorded the number of humans, their clothing, their behavior patterns, and the objects they carried. Commander, I am detecting elevated heart rates and increased brain activity in most of the subjects, she reported. Their bodies are producing chemicals associated with excitement and anticipation. Anticipation of what? Vexthul asked. Unknown. But whatever they are preparing for, it appears to be extremely important to their social group. The commander made a decision. Deploy additional probes. I want cameras recording from multiple angles. If we are going to witness a significant human ritual, we must document everything. More small observation devices flew down from the ship. They were invisible to human eyes and made no sound. Soon, the Zephyrians had a complete view of the gathering from every possible angle. As the sun began to set over Pine Ridge, lights came on around the large structure. The building became the bright center of the human settlement. Music started playing from speakers. The sound carried across the town and into the surrounding countryside. The ritual is beginning, Dr. Karaneth announced. Commander Vexthul leaned forward in his chair. In all his years of studying alien species, he had never seen anything quite like this. The humans seemed to be starting some kind of ceremony that brought together their entire community. Record everything, he ordered his crew. Whatever we are about to witness. It may help us understand this species better than anything we have observed before. The Zephyrians prepared to watch what they believed would be the most important human ritual they had ever seen. They had no idea they were about to observe a high school football game and homecoming celebration. To them, it looked like something far more mysterious and significant. The stage was set for a night of discovery that would change how the aliens viewed humanity forever. The large structure buzzed with activity as hundreds of humans filled the area around it. Commander Vexthul watched from his ship as the crowd grew bigger and bigger. What he saw confused him more than anything he had encountered in his long career. The humans had arranged themselves in specific patterns. They formed groups based on the colors they wore. Some wore red and white, others wore blue and gold. The groups stayed separate from each other, but they did not show signs of hostility. Instead, they seemed excited to be there. Dr. Karaneth studied her readings carefully. Commander, the humans are displaying tribal markings through their clothing. Choices. This appears to be some kind of territorial gathering. Are they preparing for conflict? Vexthul asked. Their behavior suggests otherwise. Look at their faces. The commander looked closer at the human expressions captured by their cameras. The humans were smiling, laughing, and embracing each other. Even the humans wearing different colors greeted each other warmly when they met. This is most unusual, Vexthul muttered. In our historical records, tribal gatherings like this always preceded warfare. Down on the planet, Danny Phillips walked through the crowd with his friends. He wore his school's red and white jersey with pride. As a senior on the football team, tonight was one of the most important nights of his life. Danny, you ready for this? Asked his teammate Carlos as they made their way toward the field. Born ready, Danny replied, though his stomach felt full of butterflies. Coach Murphy has been preparing us for this game all season. Maria Gonzalez, the high school music teacher, was setting up with her marching band students near the entrance to the stadium. She had spent weeks teaching them new songs and formations for tonight's halftime show. Remember, kids, she called to her students. Tonight we show the whole county what Pine Ridge music sounds like. Make sure your instruments are clean and your uniforms are straight. The young musicians nodded seriously. They understood the importance of their performance. Tonight was not just about the football game. It was about representing their school and their community. High above, the Zephyrian observers tried to make sense of what they were seeing. The smaller humans, which Dr. Karaneth had identified as juveniles of the species, carried strange objects made of metal and wood. They held these objects carefully and seemed to treasure them greatly. Those appear to be ritual instruments, Dr. Karaneth noted. The young ones are being trained to participate in whatever ceremony is about to begin. Commander Vexthul nodded. This made sense to him. Many species used music and sound as part of their religious or social rituals. But the humans seemed to have an unusually large number of these instruments for such a small community. As the sun continued to set, bright lights illuminated the large structure. The Zephyrians could now see that it was built in a specific shape. It had a flat area in the center, surrounded by raised seating areas where the humans were gathering. It appears to be some kind of amphitheater, observed the navigation officer. The humans have built this structure specifically for large gatherings. How many humans can it hold? Vexthul asked. Dr. Karaneth ran calculations on her datapad. Approximately 3,000 individuals, Commander. That represents a significant portion of the local population. This number impressed Vexthul. Building a structure to hold 3,000 individuals required advanced planning and cooperation. It also suggested that these gatherings happened regularly and were important enough to justify such a large construction project. On the field, Coach Ryan Murphy walked among his players as they prepared for the game. He had coached football at Pine Ridge High School for 15 years. He had seen many homecoming games, but he still felt nervous before each one. "Listen up, men," he called to his team. "Tonight is not just about winning a game. Tonight is about showing this community what kind of men you are. Play with heart, play with honor, and make your families proud." The young men nodded seriously. They understood that they carried the hopes and dreams of their entire town on their shoulders. The opposing team was strong, but they had trained hard all season. Betty Williams and her group of volunteers worked quickly to set up refreshment stands around the stadium. They had been cooking and preparing food for days. Hot dogs, hamburgers, popcorn and candy would feed the hungry crowd throughout the evening. "Make sure we have enough coffee," Betty called to her helpers. "It's going to be a cold night and people will want something warm to drink." The Zephyrian observers found this behavior particularly puzzling. The humans were not just gathering to watch whatever was about to happen. They were also consuming food and drink together as part of the experience. "Commander, the humans appear to be engaging in communal feeding behavior," Dr. Karaneth reported. "This suggests a bonding ritual of some kind. Or they are building energy for battle," suggested another officer. Vexthul considered both possibilities. Among his own people, sharing food was indeed a way to strengthen social bonds, but it could also be a way to prepare warriors for combat. The humans continued to confuse him. As the evening progressed, the crowd grew more excited. The humans with musical instruments began to play coordinated sounds. The melodies were loud and rhythmic. Other humans responded by making vocal sounds in unison. The Zephyrian translation system struggled to understand the human vocalizations. The sounds seemed to be words, but they were shouted with such emotion and energy that the meaning was unclear. "Are they chanting war songs?" asked a junior officer. "Possibly," Dr. Karaneth replied. "Or they could be religious hymns. Many species use music to invoke their deities before important events." The mystery deepened as groups of young female humans appeared wearing short, colorful clothing. They carried objects made of long strands of material. When they moved, these objects rustled and shook, creating visual displays that caught the light. "Ritual dancers," Vexthul concluded. "They are performing for their gods or their ancestors." The female humans moved in perfect coordination. They jumped, spun, and waved their arms in complex patterns. The crowd cheered loudly whenever they performed these movements. "The tribe responds positively to the dancers," Dr. Karaneth observed. "This confirms that we are witnessing a religious or cultural ceremony." Amy Rodriguez, the head cheerleader at Pine Ridge High, felt the energy of the crowd as she led her squad through their routine. She had been practicing these cheers since elementary school. Tonight she would perform in front of the biggest crowd of her life. "Ready, girls?" she called to her team. "Let's show them what Pine Ridge spirit looks like." The cheerleaders raised their pom-poms high and began their routine. The crowd joined in, shouting the words they all knew by heart. The sound echoed across the stadium and into the night sky. High above, Commander Vexthul made a decision. Whatever was about to happen here It was clearly significant to human culture. His crew needed to observe every detail if they hoped to understand this mysterious species. All stations, maintain full surveillance, he ordered. I have a feeling we are about to witness something that will help us understand humans better than months of distant observation. The ceremony was about to begin, and the Zephyrians were ready to document what they believed would be one of the most important human rituals ever recorded. The human voices rose together in a thunderous roar that seemed to shake the very ground. Commander Vexthul felt his skin tingle as the sound reached his ship's sensors. The translation systems on the Astral Observer worked frantically to decode what sounded like an ancient battle cry. "What are they saying?" Vexthul demanded, his forearms gripping the edge of his command chair. Dr. Karaneth studied her display screens with growing concern. "The translation matrix is having difficulty, Commander. The humans are using emotional inflections that distort the meaning, but I believe they are chanting something about fighting and victory and crushing their enemies." The commander's large black eyes widened. This was exactly what he had feared. The gathering was not a peaceful ceremony after all. It was a preparation for war. "Are you certain?" he asked. "The words are unclear, but the emotional energy is unmistakable," Dr. Karaneth replied. "Their heart rates are elevated, their vocal cords are strained from shouting, and they are displaying classic pre-battle excitement patterns." What the aliens did not understand was that the humans were simply cheering for their high school football team. The words "Fight, Eagles, fight" and "We're gonna crush the Vikings" were typical sports chants, not actual declarations of war. On the field below, the Pine Ridge High School marching band began their pre-game show. Maria Gonzalez raised her baton and led 100 young musicians through a complex musical performance. The trumpets blared, the drums thundered, and the entire stadium vibrated with sound. To the Zephyrians watching from space, this looked like a military display designed to intimidate enemies and rally troops for battle. The precision of the musicians, all moving in perfect formation, reminded Vexthul of his own people's ancient warrior ceremonies. "Commander, they are displaying their battle formations," reported his tactical officer. "Look at how the young ones move in perfect coordination. This level of discipline suggests extensive military training." Vexthul studied the marching band as they moved across the field in intricate patterns. The humans formed lines, circles, and complex shapes, while never missing a beat of their music. It was indeed impressive, but it also suggested that these humans were far more organized and potentially dangerous than he had first thought. "How long have they been training for this?" he asked. Dr. Karaneth checked her long-term observation records. "Our probes have detected similar gatherings happening regularly throughout their calendar year. The young ones practice these formations several times each week." This information alarmed Vexthul greatly. A species that trained their youth in military formations on such a regular basis was clearly preparing for something significant. He began to wonder if the Zephyrians had stumbled upon a civilization on the brink of a major war. Down in the stadium, Coach Ryan Murphy gathered his players around him for their final team talk. The young men wore protective armor over their bodies and helmets on their heads. Their faces were painted with fierce expressions, and many had written motivational words on their arm guards. "Men, tonight we go to battle," Coach Murphy said, using the traditional language of sports that had been passed down through generations. "We've trained for this moment all season. Now it's time to show them what Pine Ridge Warriors are made of." The players roared their approval and slammed their helmets together in a ritual display of unity. The sound echoed across the stadium, like the clash of ancient shields. High above, the Zephyrian crew watched this display with growing alarm. "Commander, the warriors are donning battle armor," Dr. Karaneth reported, "and they appear to be performing some kind of intimidation ritual." Vexthul could see the human warriors clearly through his ship's advanced cameras. They were indeed wearing protective gear that covered their bodies. Their helmets had face guards that made them look fierce and anonymous. Many carried weapons that appeared to be designed for close combat. "What kind of weapons are those?" he asked. "Unknown design, Commander. They appear to be blunt force weapons, possibly for ceremonial combat or ritualized warfare." What Dr. Karaneth was observing were football helmets and shoulder pads. The weapons she had identified were actually just the player's hands and arms, but the alien sensors interpreted their protective gloves and arm pads as combat equipment. Betty, Williams and her volunteers continued serving food to the growing crowd. But to the aliens, this looked like a massive logistical operation designed to feed an army before battle. The efficiency with which the humans organized their food distribution suggested military-level planning and coordination. "They are feeding their forces," observed the navigation officer. "This confirms that they are preparing for extended conflict." Commander Vexthol faced a difficult decision. The Zephyrian fleet had strict rules about interfering with primitive civilizations, but if they were about to witness a massive battle that could result in thousands of casualties, did they have a moral obligation to intervene? "Dr. Karaneth, what is your assessment of the situation?" he asked. "Based on all available evidence, Commander, we are about to witness a large-scale conflict between two human tribes. The level of preparation, the military formations, the battle gear, and the emotional intensity all point to imminent warfare." The doctor paused and looked at her readings again. "However, there are some elements that do not fit the pattern. The presence of elderly humans and very young children suggests this may not be a typical battle. Also, the two groups are not maintaining hostile distances from each other." This was true. In the stadium, families wearing different team colors sat near each other and chatted pleasantly. Children from opposing sides played together under the bleachers. Even the adults who supported different teams shared food and laughed together. "Perhaps it is ritualized combat," suggested another officer. "Some species engage in ceremonial battles that serve social functions rather than actual warfare." Vexthol considered this possibility. His own people had once practiced such customs. In their ancient history, controlled combat could serve to resolve disputes, establish social hierarchy, or simply provide entertainment for the community. "If that is the case, then we should continue observing without interference," he decided, "but remain alert. If the situation becomes truly violent, we may need to act." On the field, the opposing team's bus arrived. The visiting Vikings from the nearby town of Oak Valley emerged wearing their blue and gold uniforms. They looked just as prepared and determined as the home team. Their fans had also traveled to Pine Ridge and filled their section of the stadium with noise and color. To the aliens, this looked like the arrival of an enemy force. The precision with which the visiting warriors disembarked from their transport vehicle and formed ranks suggested professional military training. "The opposing force has arrived," Dr. Karaneth announced. They appear to be equally prepared for combat. Kevin O'Brien, the captain of the Pine Ridge Eagles, watched the Oak Valley Vikings take the field for their warm-up exercises. He felt the familiar mix of nervousness and excitement that came before every big game. This was homecoming, the most important game of the season. "They look bigger than I remembered," he said to his teammate Danny Phillips. "Doesn't matter," Danny replied, adjusting his shoulder pads. "We've got heart, and we've got the home crowd. That's worth at least 2 touchdowns." The two teams began their pre-game rituals on opposite ends of the field. They stretched, ran drills, and practiced their plays while the crowd watched and cheered. To human eyes, it was an exciting display of athletic preparation. To alien observers, it looked like two armies preparing for battle. Commander Vexthol made his final preparations for what he believed would be a historic observation. His crew had recorded similar conflicts on other planets, but never with such detail and clarity. Whatever happened next would provide valuable data about human nature and society. "All stations ready," he announced. "We are about to witness something that may change our understanding of this species forever." The moment Commander Vexthol had been dreading finally arrived. The two groups of human warriors faced each other across the flat green space in the center of the amphitheater. The tension in the air was so thick that the Zephyrian sensors could detect elevated stress hormones in every human present. "Commander, both forces are taking their positions," Dr. Karaneth reported, her voice tight with concern. "This appears to be the beginning of the actual conflict." Vexthol watched as 11 warriors from each side arranged themselves in precise formations. The humans wearing red and white stood at one end of the marked territory, while those in blue and gold positioned themselves at the opposite end. Between them lay a no-man's land marked with white lines. The battlefield has been clearly defined, observed the tactical officer. Both sides understand the rules of engagement. What the aliens were actually observing was the opening kickoff of a high school football game. The referees, whom the Zephyrians interpreted as tribal elders or battle mediators, stood ready with their whistles and flags. The crowd had grown, silent with anticipation. Kevin O'Brien crouched low in his stance, waiting for the whistle to blow. His heart pounded in his chest as he prepared to charge down the field. Around him, his teammates focused on their assignments, just as Coach Murphy had taught them. "Remember the plan," Kevin whispered to Danny Phillips, who was positioned beside him. "Hit hard, hit clean, and protect each other out there." The whistle blew with a sharp blast that echoed across the stadium. To the aliens, it sounded like a battle horn calling warriors to combat. What happened next left them speechless. The human warriors exploded into motion with a violence and intensity that shocked even the experienced Zephyrian observers. Bodies collided at high speed, creating impacts that registered on the ship's sensors from space. The sound of clashing armor and shouting voices filled the night air. "By the 7 moons," whispered Dr. Karaneth, watching as humans threw themselves at each other with what appeared to be complete disregard for personal safety. They are actually engaging in physical combat. But as the aliens continued to watch, they began to notice something strange about this battle. The violence followed. Very specific patterns. The warriors would clash for a few moments, then stop completely. They would regroup, face each other again, and resume fighting. This cycle repeated over and over. "The combat is highly ritualized," the navigation officer observed. "There are definite rules governing their behavior." Commander Vexthul studied the action more carefully. The humans were indeed fighting, but they were not trying to kill each other. When one warrior fell, others would help him up. When the action stopped, members of both sides would walk calmly back to their positions without showing hatred or anger toward their opponents. "This is unlike any warfare we have previously observed," he admitted. "The level of control and organization is remarkable." On the field, Danny Phillips caught a pass from his quarterback and ran toward the Oak Valley goal line. 3 Viking defenders converged on him, tackling him just short of scoring. The crowd erupted in cheers and groans as the pile of players untangled themselves. "Good hit," Danny said to the Oak Valley safety who had brought him down. "You guys came ready to play tonight." The Viking player helped Danny to his feet with a grin. "Your quarterback has a good arm. We're going to have to watch him all night." To the Zephyrians, this exchange between enemies during combat was completely incomprehensible. In every species they had studied, warriors who were trying to defeat each other did not engage in friendly conversation during battle. "Commander, the combatants appear to be communicating with their opponents," Dr. Karaneth reported in amazement. "This suggests a level of civilization far beyond what we initially observed." As the game continued, the aliens began to notice other puzzling elements. The younger humans who had been performing ritual dances earlier continued their activities on the sidelines during breaks in the combat. They cheered and encouraged their warriors while maintaining their colorful displays. Amy Rodriguez led her cheerleaders through routine after routine, keeping the Pine Ridge crowd engaged and excited. The girls formed human pyramids, executed complex jumps, and led the fans in organized chants that echoed across the stadium. The ritual dancers continued to perform throughout the battle, the tactical officer noted. This suggests that the combat itself is part of a larger ceremony. The marching band, led by Maria Gonzalez, played energetic music during timeouts and between plays. The sound of trumpets, drums, and other instruments provided a soundtrack to the action that kept both teams and spectators engaged. The musicians are providing auditory support for their warriors, Dr. Karaneth observed. This could be designed to boost morale and maintain fighting spirit. But the most confusing aspect of the entire event was the behavior of the spectators. Instead of fleeing from the violence or taking sides in the combat, the humans in the stands seemed to be enjoying themselves immensely. They cheered, laughed, shared food, and celebrated both successful and unsuccessful plays. "The non-combatants are treating this conflict as entertainment," Vexthul said, unable to hide his amazement. "They are actually enjoying watching their own species engage in ritualized warfare." Even more puzzling was the presence of humans who supported both sides. Some families had members cheering for different teams. Friends sat together despite wearing opposing colors. Children played games that had nothing to do with the battle happening on the field below them. This level of social complexity is beyond our current understanding models, Dr. Karaneth admitted. The humans have somehow created a form of controlled conflict that serves multiple social functions simultaneously. As the first half of the game progressed, the aliens documented every detail they could observe. The precise movements of the warriors, the strategic planning visible in their formations, the leadership structure that guided each team, and the incredible physical conditioning that allowed the humans to engage in such intense activity for extended periods. These are not primitive warriors, Vexthul concluded. The level of training, strategy, and coordination we are witnessing suggests a highly advanced military culture. Coach Murphy paced the sidelines, calling out instructions to his players and adjusting his strategy based on what the Oak Valley team was doing. His years of experience showed in every decision he made about when to call timeouts, which plays to run, and how to motivate his young athletes. "Keep your heads up," he shouted to his team during a brief break. "We're doing exactly what we practiced. Trust your training and trust each other." The visiting coach, Tom Harrison, was equally engaged in leading his Vikings. The two men had been friends for years and had coached against each other many times, but tonight, they were focused entirely on helping their teams perform at their best. "The battlefield commanders appear to be highly skilled," the Zephyrian tactical officer observed. "They are constantly adapting their strategies based on changing conditions." As halftime approached, the aliens prepared themselves for what they assumed would be a brief rest period before the combat resumed. They had no idea they were about to witness the most spectacular part of the entire evening. The first half ended with Pine Ridge leading by 3 points, having successfully moved their oval-shaped battle object into Oak Valley territory more effectively than their opponents. The warriors from both sides walked off the field together, showing no signs of the hatred or exhaustion that typically followed real combat. "Remarkable," Commander Vexthul murmured. "We may be observing the most sophisticated form of ritualized conflict ever recorded in our database." During the break between the two halves of combat, something happened that completely changed how the Zephyrian observers understood what they were witnessing. Dr. Karaneth noticed patterns in the human behavior that seemed familiar, though she could not immediately identify why. "Commander, I am detecting something unusual in the crowd dynamics," she reported, studying her sensors carefully. "The humans are not behaving like spectators at a military conflict. Their emotional patterns match something else entirely." "What do you mean?" Vexthul asked, moving closer to examine her readings. "The stress hormones are all wrong for combat observation. Instead of fear, anxiety, or bloodlust, I am reading elevated levels of social bonding chemicals. The same compounds we see in our own people during community celebration rituals." This observation intrigued the commander. He had spent years studying the social behaviors of various species, and Dr. Karaneth was one of the most experienced xenobiologists in the Zephyrian fleet. If she was seeing patterns that reminded her of celebration rather than warfare, it was worth investigating further. On the field below, the halftime show began. The Pine Ridge High School marching band took center stage, led by Maria Gonzalez. What followed was a 15-minute performance that showcased months of preparation and practice. The young musicians moved through intricate formations while playing complex musical pieces. They created shapes that told a story about their town's history, their school's achievements, and their hopes for the future. The crowd watched in appreciation, applauding at the end of each musical movement. "The musical warriors are performing some kind of historical narrative," Dr. Karaneth observed. "This appears to be educational rather than militaristic." But what truly amazed the aliens was what happened next. Amy Rodriguez and her cheerleaders joined with the dance team to perform a routine that had been choreographed specifically for homecoming night. The performance celebrated not just their school, but their entire community. The routine included elements that honored military veterans, recognized local businesses, thanked teachers and parents, and welcomed back former students who had returned. For the celebration, as different groups were recognized, sections of the crowd stood and cheered in appreciation. "Commander, Dr. Karaneth said, her voice filled with wonder. "I believe we have been completely wrong about what we are observing." "How so?" "This is not a military exercise or ritualized combat. This is a community bonding celebration. The physical contest we observed is just one element of a much larger social ritual." Vexathul considered this new interpretation. As he watched the halftime performances, he began to see the event through different eyes. The precision of the marching band was not military drilling, but artistic expression. The cheerleaders were not battle dancers, but community entertainers. The crowd was not watching warriors, but supporting their children and neighbors. "If this is a community celebration, then what was the physical combat we witnessed?" he asked. "Controlled competition," Dr. Karaneth replied with growing certainty. "Many advanced species use competitive games to channel aggressive instincts in positive directions. The humans have created a complex sport that allows them to display physical prowess, strategic thinking, and team cooperation without actual violence." This revelation was staggering. The Zephyrians had assumed they were watching primitive warfare, when in reality they were observing one of the most sophisticated social constructs they had ever encountered. Principal Janet Stone took the microphone during a break in the halftime performance. As the leader of the school, she had the honor of recognizing the seniors who would be graduating that year and the alumni who had returned for homecoming. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced to the crowd, "tonight we celebrate not just our Eagles football team, but the entire Pine Ridge community. We welcome back graduates from the classes of 1965 through 2025, and we honor the families who make our school strong." As she called out the names of distinguished alumni, people throughout the stadium stood and waved. Some had become teachers, others had served in the military, and many had started businesses or families in other towns but still considered Pine Ridge their home. "The elder female appears to be conducting some kind of genealogical ceremony," Dr. Karaneth observed. "She is connecting the present community with its historical roots." Commander Vexthul was beginning to understand the true complexity of what they were witnessing. This was not just a game or even a simple celebration. It was a multifaceted ritual that served dozens of social functions simultaneously. The event brought the community together across generational lines. It provided entertainment and excitement for people of all ages. It taught young people about teamwork, dedication, and healthy competition. It honored the community's history and traditions. It created shared memories that would bind people together for years to come. "Dr. Karaneth, how many separate social functions can you identify in this single ritual?" Vexthul asked. The scientist studied her data for several minutes before responding. "At least 15 distinct purposes, Commander. Physical fitness, training for the young, strategic thinking development, leadership skill building, community identity reinforcement, intergenerational bonding, historical education, artistic expression through music and dance, economic activity through food sales and donations, social hierarchy establishment through competition, mate selection opportunities for young adults." She paused and continued counting. "Stress relief through cheering and celebrating, emotional regulation through shared experience, conflict resolution through controlled competition, alumni networking and community connection maintenance, and pure entertainment value for psychological well-being." Vexthul was speechless. His people had advanced technology and had spread across multiple star systems, but they had never developed a single social ritual that accomplished so many different purposes at once. As the second half of the game began, the aliens observed with completely different eyes. They now saw the physical contest as just one layer of an incredibly sophisticated social structure. Every aspect of the event served multiple purposes and contributed to the overall strength of the human community. Tim Brooks, a Pine Ridge graduate from 1987, sat in the stands with his family. He had brought his own children back to see his old school play, just as his father had brought him years ago. The tradition connected him to his past while creating new memories for the future. "Dad, why do we come to these games every year?" his teenage daughter asked. "Because this is where we come from," Tim replied. watching the current players run the same plays he had run 30 years earlier. This place, these people, these traditions, they are all part of who we are. Someday, you'll bring your children here, and they'll understand too. The aliens recorded this conversation along with hundreds of others happening throughout the stadium. Each family had their own stories, their own connections to the school and the community, and their own reasons for participating in the celebration. "Commander," Dr. Karaneth said quietly, "I believe we are observing something truly remarkable. These humans have created a social bonding mechanism that is more sophisticated than anything in our databases." "How so?" "Most species use either competition or cooperation to build social bonds, but rarely both simultaneously. The humans have found a way to combine controlled conflict with community celebration, creating an experience that strengthens relationships at every level of their society." As the final minutes of the game ticked away, with Pine Ridge holding on to a narrow lead, the entire stadium united in excitement. Fans from both teams cheered for the impressive plays made by either side. The competition was fierce, but the respect between the communities was evident. Commander Vexthul realized that the Zephyrians had discovered something that would change how they viewed not just humans, but social development in all species. The humans had evolved beyond simple tribal loyalty to create inclusive communities that could compete while still cooperating. When the final whistle blew and Pine Ridge had won the game, both teams met at the center of the field to shake hands and congratulate each other on a well-played contest. The fans from both sides applauded the effort and sportsmanship they had witnessed. "Incredible," Vexthul whispered. "They have turned potential conflict into community strength. No wonder this species has been so successful." As the celebration continued into the night, Commander Vexthul and his crew sat in stunned silence aboard the Astral Observer. What they had witnessed was so far beyond their expectations that they struggled to find words to describe it. The simple ritual they had planned to document had revealed layers of complexity that challenged everything they thought they knew about developing civilizations. Dr. Karaneth worked frantically to compile their observations into a report that would somehow capture the magnitude of their discovery. Her scientific training told her to be objective and analytical, but her personal amazement kept breaking through her professional composure. "Commander, how do I explain to the High Council that we have discovered a species that has solved social problems we are still struggling with?" she asked. Vexthul understood her difficulty. The Zephyrians were an advanced civilization with faster-than-light travel, planetary engineering capabilities, and technologies that seemed magical to younger species. But they had never developed anything as elegant as what the humans had just demonstrated. "Focus on the functions," he suggested. "Document every purpose this single event served for their society." Down on the planet, the humans continued their celebration as if unaware that they were being observed by visitors from another star system. Frank Nelson, who had graduated from Pine Ridge High School in 1952, stood with his great-grandson near the field where he had once played football himself. "Great-grandpa, did you really play here when you were my age?" 8-year-old Bobby asked, looking up at the elderly man with wide eyes. "Sure did, son," Frank replied with a warm smile. "Played right here on this same field. Of course the stands were smaller then, and we didn't have lights like these, but the feeling was just the same." "What feeling?" Frank thought for a moment, trying to put into words something he had felt for over 70 years. "The feeling of being part of something bigger than yourself, of knowing that your family and friends are counting on you to do your best, of understanding that win or lose, you are surrounded by people who care about you." The aliens recorded this conversation along with hundreds of others happening throughout the crowd. Grandparents shared memories with grandchildren. Former teachers reconnected with students they had taught decades ago. Young couples met and began relationships that might last a lifetime. "The intergenerational bonding is remarkable," Dr. Karaneth observed. "This single event connects humans across their entire lifespan. From the youngest children to the oldest adults, everyone has a role and a place in the celebration." "Coach." Ryan Murphy stood on the field surrounded by his victorious players, but his attention was focused on something more important than the scoreboard. He watched as his young athletes congratulated their opponents, helped injured players from both teams, and thanked the officials who had managed the game. "I'm proud of you, men," he told his team, "not just because you won tonight, but because of how you won. You played with honor, you respected your opponents, and you represented our community the right way." Danny Phillips, still breathing hard from the game, looked around at the celebration continuing in the stands. His parents were there, along with his grandparents, his teachers, and neighbors who had watched him grow up. The weight of their support and expectations had pushed him to perform at his best. "Coach, this is what it's all about, isn't it?" he said. "Not just the game, but everything else. The people, the traditions, the feeling of belonging to something special." Murphy nodded approvingly. After 15 years of coaching, he had learned that the most important lessons were not about football strategy or physical conditioning. They were about character, community, and the bonds that hold people together through good times and bad. High above them, the Zephyrian observers documented every detail of the post-game celebration. They watched as families gathered for photographs, as friends made plans to meet again, and as the entire community began the process of cleaning up and preparing for the next week's activities. "The efficiency of their community organization is astounding," the navigation officer observed. "Look how quickly they are restoring the facility to its normal condition." Betty Williams and her volunteers had already begun packing up the food service equipment. Students from both schools worked together to pick up trash and stack chairs. The marching band carefully cleaned their instruments and stored their uniforms for the next performance. "Everyone knows their role," Dr. Karaneth noted. "This level of cooperation could not be achieved without years of practice and social conditioning. But what impressed the aliens most was how naturally the humans moved, from competition to cooperation. The same people who had been cheering against each other just hours before were now working together to ensure that everyone got home safely and that the facilities were properly maintained." Principal Janet Stone made one final announcement over the public address system. "Thank you to everyone who made tonight's homecoming celebration possible. Thank you to our players, coaches, band members, cheerleaders, volunteers, and fans. Thank you to our visitors from Oak Valley for a wonderful game, and thank you to our alumni for coming home to remind us all what Pine Ridge spirit really means." The crowd applauded one final time before beginning to disperse into the night. Cars filled with happy families pulled out of the parking lot. Teenagers made plans for post-game gatherings. Alumni said goodbye to old friends with promises to stay in touch. Commander Vexthul watched as the lights around the stadium dimmed and the human settlement returned to its normal nighttime appearance. The ritual was complete, but its effects would last far beyond this single evening. "Dr. Karaneth, what is your final assessment of what we have observed?" he asked. The scientist took a deep breath before responding. "Commander, I believe we have witnessed the most sophisticated example of social engineering ever recorded in our databases. The humans have created a cultural mechanism that accomplishes more social functions simultaneously than we thought possible." She paused to organize her thoughts. This single event strengthened family bonds, educated young people, honored community history, provided entertainment, channeled competitive instincts positively, created economic activity, facilitated social networking, and reinforced shared values, all while maintaining the appearance of a simple competitive game. Vexthul nodded slowly. "And the implications for our understanding of human potential?" "Staggering, Commander. If humans can embed this level of complexity into what they consider a routine community activity, imagine what they might accomplish when they turn their full attention to larger challenges. Space exploration, planetary management, interstellar, diplomacy, scientific research." The commander felt a chill run through his body as he considered the implications. The Zephyrians had assumed that humans were a primitive species that would require centuries or millennia to develop true civilization. But what they had observed suggested that humans might achieve technological and social advancement far more quickly than anyone had predicted. "Prepare a full report for transmission to the High Council," Vexthul ordered. "Mark it as priority 1 with recommendations for immediate policy review." "What recommendations, Commander?" Vexthul looked one last time at the peaceful human settlement below them. that we reconsider our entire approach to this species. They are not the primitive civilization we assumed them to be. They are a young but sophisticated society that has already solved social problems we are still working on. Should we recommend making contact? The commander thought carefully before responding. Not yet, but we should prepare for the possibility that they will achieve interstellar capability much sooner than our current projections suggest. And when they do, we want to be ready to welcome them as equals, not as subjects to be studied. As the astral observer prepared to leave Earth's solar system, the crew remained speechless about what they had discovered. They had come to observe a primitive ritual and instead had witnessed a masterpiece of social engineering that would influence Zephyrian culture for generations to come. The report they filed would eventually lead to a complete revision of first contact protocols and a new understanding of how to evaluate the potential of developing civilizations. But more importantly, it would prepare the galaxy for the day when humans would join the community of spacefaring species as partners rather than pupils. The humans of Pine Ridge continued their lives, unaware that their simple homecoming celebration had changed the course of interstellar relations forever. They had shown the universe that true civilization was not measured by technology alone, but by the wisdom to create meaning, community, and connection in the ordinary moments of life.